Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we talk about Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. Today's guest is Cody Hedgecoth. Cody is the part-time youth minister at Cody Church of Christ, and so we're going to be talking to him today, and we're actually going to swap this up a little bit. If you listened to the podcast with Benjamin and Bobby a few weeks ago, I had mentioned on that podcast that Cody had texted me a lot of really great questions that I thought this would be a good format to share some of his thoughts so everybody else could benefit and hear the types of questions that Cody had. So before we get into that, though, I'm going to let Cody go ahead and introduce himself. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing as far as work, both with your full-time job and talk a little bit about maybe your life. Not newly married, but you've been married now for over a year at least. And tell me a little bit about the work as youth minister at Cody.
Yeah, like Craig said, my name's Cody Hedgecoth, and I'm the youth minister at Cody. I'm also, I work for TVA, or RSI, it's a contractor of TVA, as a project control specialist. And what I do is scheduling and estimating for transmission line projects and substation projects in the transmission group for TVA. And I've been in that group for almost a year now. And as far as youth ministry goes, the middle of June of this year will make 1 full year of being a youth minister. And Craig mentioned that I've been married, sort of fairly newly married. May 26th of this year will make 3 years. I actually met my wife here at the Christian Student Center, and we dated for about a year and a half before we got married. So it was, she's pretty awesome.
So your track to finding the student center was pretty rapid, because you showed up and you had been doing the collegiate high at Chattanooga State, and I wasn't really familiar with that program, so I thought you were coming in, and I had already identified you as a potential candidate for leadership here, which you eventually did, and did a great job at that. For those listening, Cody's schedule was absolutely horrendous. I don't know how he was doing everything he was doing.
It was terrible.
But for those of you that don't know Cody Hedgecoth, he's an extremely motivated individual, and his busy schedule reflected just how motivated he was. But he showed up, and I thought, oh great, here's a freshman in college, and come to find out he had finished 2 years of college while he was still in high school. So I didn't have him for nearly as long as I had hoped to have him, and so he came in and did some really great things, was a great example. He had it all figured out. He, like he said, met Santana, his future wife, here, and was doing an internship at TVA, and pretty much had his life already lined out. So he jumped on it pretty rapidly. So tell me a little bit about, because obviously you got into youth ministry, and I know that you have a passion there, but what transpired, what kind of things were I want to say ingrained, but that's not the right word at all. You came to the student center. Tell me just a little bit about what happened while you were at the student center that might have contributed your thought process to being so willing to get into youth ministry, which would happen obviously a few years down the road.
Yeah, so as Craig said, I was at the student center for 2 years. That first year is like nothing I'd ever experienced before. You know, a lot of folks grow up going to church camps or something, so it was like a year-round church camp or something, almost a year-long spiritual high of staying with, your fellow Christians, having devotionals and meals together all the time, and just that community aspect was amazing. And then I was fortunate enough, second year, to be a student director here, or student ambassador. I think we've changed the name since I
We
was
did.
here.
Yeah.
So I was student ambassador for that first semester, and like Craig mentioned, my hectic schedule sort of got in the way of my effectiveness here, so I thought it was best to sort of step down as a student director, but knew that I still had a passion for it, just I didn't have the time to, between my internship and 21 credit hours and trying to plan a wedding. It's just,
That was a bad day for me too. When you came to me and said, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to do that." I tell you, I cried and cried for weeks. It was it was bad.
well, so
Don't leave me, Cody.
so knowing I wanted to, sort of getting a taste of what I thought youth ministry would be like as a student director, even though it was folks my age, it still had the same goal. You're trying to reach out and disciple folks and help people grow. So just an age difference really is what I thought going into youth ministry. And so it worked out. The youth minister at Saudi, which is the church I actually grew up in, got a position in Alabama. And so I go to Saudi, become their part-time youth minister. Again, still busy schedule, so can only be part-time. And I've always loved kids. They're just so awesome. I don't think they truly know their full potential. And I just wanted to help them realize that, I grew up hearing that I was the church of the future as a middle schooler and teenager and high schooler. And I just thought that was so bogus, and just how, I understand the statement, and it's supposed to be an encouraging statement, but it had the opposite effect on me growing up. So I wanted to really teach them that they are the church of today. As soon as they make the decision to put Christ on in baptism and become a Christian, follow him, that they're in. They can start doing whatever it is they're wanting to do. And even before that, really. But, I wanted to make sure they knew that they were empowered and help guide them and teach them, some of the things I'd learned here at the Student Center, and it took coming here to learn about, owning my own faith. And I hope to ask Craig about that here in a little bit. I don't want them to have to wait to get to college for them to start doing that.
Yeah, that's a real good point too. And I think we, as church and as leadership in the church, we oftentimes take that for granted. Paul wrote to Timothy. He said, don't let people despise you for your youth. And I think there's some really great lessons there, because Paul definitely saw Timothy, and we don't know exactly how old he was, but definitely as someone who was not just part of the church, but taking an active role in doing some really great things for the church. So I think that is something that needs to be talked about more with our youth. So yeah.
Yep.
So what you just mentioned, I want you to continue your thought on this. What impact do you think the Student Center had on your faith and your spiritual maturation while you were here?
So just briefly, it had a tremendous impact on my faith. Growing up, I grew up going to church. Well, I say that. I did whenever I was a young kid. There was a large space in my life where we never attended church at all. And then I got to high school and about 9th grade and started having questions and started asking my folks, and we started going back to church. And about after 2 or 3 months of going back to church, I was baptized and thought, hey, I'm in. I know that I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I can learn the rest of this stuff later. People spend a lifetime and never know all of it.
Right.
So then I get here, fast forward several years, and it's the first time I'd ever had the choice to go to church or not, since I had been baptized and had my family support, living under my own house, and I started to have these deeper questions, more so than just the questions I had at growing up in the youth group of so growing up in the youth group, I'd always we had these Bible lessons. I guess I just took it at face value.
Yeah.
And I had Bible knowledge, but I'm not sure it was truly just written on my heart, or it was a true, strong faith. So I think I heard Walter mention this sort of in his he truly learned to own his own faith here, and so it took me having that choice, that opportunity to really reflect on my own faith and my own Christian walk, to realize that what I thought I knew is not necessarily wrong, but I had it misunderstood. I thought it was almost like a false confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I get here and realized, hey, this is like the Acts 2 church that we read about. This is what it's supposed to be about. It's about reaching people. It's not about following, checking off boxes or a rule book. Being a Christian is so much more than that.
So you've been in youth ministry now for how many years did you say?
Almost 1 year now.
Okay, so do you think the church at large is preparing our youth for life in college?
No. Yeah, I don't think so. And again, I think it's just because of the choices. I think most college students or high school grads, whether they go to college or not, will tell you, all the responsibilities that they now have and the situations they are put in once they're outside of high school are just so much different. It's more on you, less reliance on your family, less, and I don't think we, at least in my case, I can only speak for my personal experience and some of my close friends. I'm not sure that we were given enough slack. I think we were pretty sheltered growing up and almost hidden from what the real world is truly like. From a spiritual standpoint, life just gets messy, and if you don't know that that's an option, you're sheltered from knowing what's even out there.
Yeah.
How can you ever be prepared for it? So I understand sheltering. I do understand, but if you don't coach somebody before they get there and wait for them to get in a situation, then they just won't be prepared for it.
Okay, so there's an installation that is taking place that I see as far as kids that get here as freshmen. It's almost a paradoxical situation because they've been, we've all heard the term like helicopter parents and that kind of stuff. And what's crazy to me, and you may have more insight now that you've been working with youth and parents to a certain degree, is that as much as we may be trying or thinking that we're insulating our kids, they've been exposed already to a ton of stuff that parents, I don't think, even begin to fathom. So that whole, I'm, insulating my kids, I'm sheltering my kids, what's actually taking place behind the scenes is that they're being exposed to a lot of stuff. The church isn't dealing with that stuff. They don't want to deal with that stuff because it's awkward and the questions are tough. And so they come to college now and they're out for the first time and they have this level of independence that they haven't had before. Plus they've been exposed to all of this stuff in high school, and it's a ticking time bomb.
That's a good point. I do agree with you there. Speaking from experience, there's things my parents never knew I was exposed to, and they were some of the ones that tried to shelter me. I got into some stuff that I shouldn't have been into. And they never knew. And luckily, I had a youth minister that after I dealt with some of these issues for years and years, I was able to go to him. But the parents that sheltered me, still don't, were never aware while I was going through it, while they thought they were doing me a favor by not, talking to me about certain things. And one that I think a lot of teenagers struggle with, that in church is just a taboo topic, is just sex and now how technology grows, and it's just more expensive.
Yes,
people in trouble.
I talked to, and for those of you listening right now, this is the title of our podcast, The Lion, the Way, and the War. Right now, what Cody and I are talking about, this is the war part of it. This is how Satan is attacking our youth. And we haven't really delved into this topic as much yet, but I think this is a great thing that more people need to be aware of, because I certainly have had parents approach me and talk to me about, what are my kids? How are my kids doing at the student center? Are they plugged in? Are they going to the campus ministry there? And sometimes I have to tell them, no, I haven't even seen that kid. And the things that they've been exposed to in high school and even elementary school have laid the groundwork because it has not been addressed. We have not addressed that as a church. We are failing, guys. We're failing as a church to address these issues. And Satan is grabbing hold of our kids, grabbing hold of our youth from a very young age. And so this is why it's important that you all are hearing from youth ministers firsthand. We had Cody Harrington on last week, and we didn't get deep into this topic, but it's there nonetheless, and I think that it needs to be addressed. So all that said, Cody, and maybe you've already stated this, but just reiterate, as a youth minister, what do you see as the biggest issue our youth are facing today?
Just for clarification, biggest like worldly sin issue or like the biggest?
I mean, what is the biggest issue on in the world of the youth as far as pulling them away from Christ, doing spiritual damage to them?
To be honest, I think it just varies so much by individual. Stuff that shakes other folks, doesn't shake me, and then stuff that shakes, me doesn't bother or affect anybody else. But, just thinking about young folks in general, I think whether it's celebrities or politicians or just adults they look up to or whoever, there's a big theme right now about everybody having their own truth. Which just isn't the case. I can understand people having different perspectives, different views on things, and I respect those opinions and views. But there's this false sense of security, and I can do whatever I want to as long as I'm okay with it. And, that's just not what the Bible teaches. So from a spiritual standpoint, there's some things in the Bible that in 21st century Western culture is disagrees with what the Bible has to say, and the Bible is very clear on some of those topics. Whether it's same-sex marriage or cussing like a sailor or whatever. I mean, there's just different things. So I think it's just the biggest thing overarching is this false sense of security that I have my own truth and I can do what I want. Yeah.
Subjective morality is what you're talking about. And I think our interview last week with the other Cody Harrington, he had mentioned that social media has made a big impact on the access to that. So these kids are getting these ideas from somewhere. It's not just something they wake up one morning and go, oh, hey, I am authority unto myself, and I decide that if it's good for me, then it's okay. Those ideas, the celebrities, the constant bombardment has a vehicle. And I'm curious to know, do you see social media playing the vehicle for what you just described, or is there something else at play that we don't know about?
I do. I think that is a huge contributing factor for my specific youth group. That several of the families are pretty tight when it comes to technology. They try and keep a close eye on those things. So if the kids have social media, I'm not sure, the parents are aware of it, but they try and do their part because I think they recognize that. But even just peers, I mean, you can't really escape that thought process. Whether you're listening to the radio, the songs these kids, anybody listen to, the friends you have at school, teachers that you might respect and look up to, having, teaching you different things than what you might have heard or learned before. So yeah, I think social media plays a huge role for, and that's not even limited to kids. There's things on social media that come up on my newsfeed on like Facebook. Like, why in the world is this coming up, or this video? I don't know if you guys are like me. You'll start watching, a video on, a time-lapse video of a house being built, and you get caught in that loop. The next video comes up, comes up. About 10 videos down, you're like, how did I get to this? Well, some of those how did I get to this moments are not good things at all, and right. That is out there. So you can stumble on it by accident. So yeah, I think social media plays a huge factor. But even if social media went away, I mean, the world hadn't changed. It's just gone digital.
Yeah.
So it's been here since Adam and Eve. It's not something we can escape.
Yeah. Last question for you, and then I'm going to let you assault me with some questions. And what do you think, Cody, is the way that churches and youth ministries can better prepare our youth for the college ministry? And I ask that for a very selfish reason, because I've seen ones that have come here to the campus ministry that have a level of assurance in their faith that is really, to me, astounding, but there are so few and far between. I'd say high 95% of the college freshmen coming in here are so unprepared for college life. Where they're at spiritually is infancy in a lot of ways. And, I work with that, and for a lot of them, while they're here, I am I'm like shaking their universe, with some of the questions that I ask. I mean, it's obvious they've never been asked some of these questions before, and they're not prepared to deal with it. And it's like, so I crack their universe in a manner of speaking. But you have to do that. You have to sometimes tear something down to rebuild it. And I just wonder how much further I could get in the 4 years they're here if they came in here better prepared. So all of that to ask you that question.
So I don't think there's a sure formula, but if you want somebody to own their own faith, then you got to give them the opportunity to. So, and then and to me, the way of getting there is asking a bunch of questions and talking to a mentor that can help you through those. But it's, getting yourself in gear to search it out on your own. Because, I mean, there's a lot of different, quote unquote brands of Christianity.
Yeah.
And they're all saying different things. At the end of the day, we got a Bible that we can rely on. We know whatever's in it is true and factual. And so I think the biggest thing that we could help the youth before, they get to college is, I think everybody wants their best interest and wants them to have their own faith. But I don't think their actions show that. I think, I was going to ask you, I think, a very similar question here. Mm-hmm. What your thoughts on this? But you gotta ask them the questions and let them find the answers. And if they need help them along the way. I think another great way of doing this is, it's nothing new. It seems like it's branded as a new movement, but this discipleship movement, mm-hmm. I mean, that's sort of how Jesus did it. It's nothing that's new. It's been around for about 2,000 years now. But if we would take an interest in some young folks, if there's a person in your youth group who likes to go fishing and you like to go fishing, that's simple. Take them fishing. And then while you're out there, maybe say a prayer, might bring up, how Jesus, that's how he actually got his apostles, was most of them were fishermen. He said, hey, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. You squeeze things in there like that. So I encourage folks who are listening to this, pick somebody in your youth group at your congregation that is, that you have some common interest with, some already common ground that you can befriend, invite them over for dinner, take them bowling, take them fishing, do whatever your interests are. Try and bring up Bible-related topics. Ask them questions. Try and be their spiritual mentor, because, anybody walking the earth has parents, right? Sometimes you don't feel comfortable going to your parents about things, or you don't want your parents to be disappointed in you if you got a spiritual question. You think they might.
Mm-hmm. I think that parents need to understand too that what Cody just said about, kids a lot of times don't feel comfortable going to their parents, and parents need to be okay with that. They need to understand and remember back when they were kids that made it just maybe wasn't an option to go to your parents. And so having someone in your life that is mature, that is spiritually minded, that you can go to, that is so needed in the church today. And I don't think we fostered that type of mentality in the church for a variety of reasons. So I agree 100% with what you're saying, Cody. Okay, so I'm going to segue in now to asking you. So, all right, Cody, at this time, I'm going to turn the reins over to you and let you ask me some questions, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, so the first question I have here is from my personal experience from the 2 years I attended the CSC. It seems like the two main topics that reoccurred the most around the CSC, or at least the time I was here, was one, the importance of owning your own faith, which we've already talked about some, and then a person's struggle with self-worth. Why do you think these two topics are so popular or focused on here at the CSC?
Well, the foundation of keeping a person in their faith beyond the student center has to be grounded in their faith. It cannot be somebody else's faith. It's just not going to work. That's exactly why we have the numbers that we do. Over from 50% to 2/3 of kids when they come to college don't stay involved in church in any way. They walk away from their faith because they never had their own faith to begin with. So, like I said earlier, high 95% of kids coming in are so far behind. They don't have that foundational support that is needed. So we have to deal with that here. And so I'm asking some questions to see where they're at. And I don't sugarcoat stuff here, as you remember. I say it like it is. And I'll ask some of these kids, I'm like, why are you a Christian? Seriously, why are you a Christian? Do you even believe in God? Do you believe that God created this universe? And for the first time, they really have to stop and think about that. Not what mom and dad want to hear, or uncle whoever, whatever family member or elder or preacher or minister or anything like that. They have to think about it on their own. Because I tell them, I'm like, don't, if you're not going to search your heart for these deeper questions, what's really real? What really matters in this life? And if you don't have the maturity to stop and really think about that, maybe that's the starting point. Maybe we need to start from there. So establishing that as a foundational principle, that's got to happen. And like I said, some of them come in here and they have that, and that's a great starting point. I see great things happening with those kids that come in. Second part of your question, the self-worth. Oh my goodness, that is probably it almost goes hand in hand with that first part in a lot of ways. Kids today are so exposed to so much stuff, and they hear the lie that Satan wants them to hear is, wow, Cody, you've done a lot of bad stuff in your life. You're really dirty. You're really filthy. And there's nothing that you can ever do to get clean from that. So, you might as well just give it up and go ahead and jump in it with both feet. And you know what? Actually, who's to say that what you're doing is bad anyway? You talked about that subjective morality. And that's Satan just continuing to feed us those lies. And so it's almost like I have to reprogram these kids and go back to the biblical model and say, you know what, Jesus died for some really horrendous people. Do you think that you own the corner market on doing bad stuff? Look at David. He did some really, really horrible stuff. I mean, that guy was, when you look and see what he did, who wants to be friends with him? I mean, his best friend, he had him killed just so he could get away with sleeping with the guy's wife. I mean, what kind of messed up is that? And yet God describes him as a man after his own heart. So these kids come in today and they think that they've done this horrible stuff and that there's just no hope for them. And that's a lie. That is just a flat out lie. And so, we have to talk about that. And it has to be drilled into their heads that, you know what, you are worthy No matter what you've done, there's always hope. You are worthy. God wants you. He loves you. You are his kid. You are his child. And there's nothing that you will ever do that is going to make him turn away from you and not want you to be his child. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, we were talking about the youth group earlier. I think I see that in some of our kids too, struggling with this. And something I meant to add earlier is that I think that might be an issue we have with, maybe it's not every church or every congregation, but I think sometimes we make kids feel, or people in the faith feel like if they sin, they're going straight to hell.
Yeah.
That this whole idea of forgiveness it's not so much talked, it's just the consequence of the action, which I think is so weird, because the whole reason people attend church and go to church is because of Jesus is, they're Christian because of Jesus, and that's sort of why he made his sacrifice. But I think we spend so much time talking about these consequences and so little time talking about the forgiveness and love that Jesus showed through his sacrifice, that I don't know how you can talk about one without the other, and it seems like we do that quite a bit.
I agree. Yeah.
So, Craig, my next question is, and again, we've already touched on some of this, but from my position as a youth minister, I feel a great pressure, almost even a worry when it comes to my kids in the youth group. I love those kids more than anything and would do anything for any of them. We've all heard the statistics that you mentioned here, the alarmingly high percentage of high school grads that lose their faith once they get to college, and I think that number even increases once they leave college. I personally think a big reason for this high percentage is because people never learn to own their own faith while in high school. Then they get to college and realize, as I mentioned earlier, for the first time in their lives, they have a choice. It took me getting to college and having the choice before I started to question my faith. I'm so thankful that I got here at the Student Center to answer those, to get me through answering those questions.
Yeah.
So I think the reason for this, for me at least, on why, I didn't so much waver on if God or Jesus was real, but I was not firm in why I was truly a Christian. I had always been given the cookie-cutter answers to Bible questions, which is what I was used to, and that satisfied me. Instead of being taught how to think about Bible questions and taught how to find the answers to my questions, I don't want my kids in the youth group to have to wait to get to college or out of the house or on their own, before they realize they can truly own their own faith now. So I know college age folks and high school age folks aren't far apart in age, but their situation and responsibilities are tremendously different. So my question is, how do you help high schoolers realize the difference between knowing answers or, knowledge of the Bible and owning their own faith? And I guess my second question would be, what advice would you give a youth minister, or anyone for that matter, to be able to guide or direct the folks they are trying to disciple to own their own faith?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so that really gets down to how we are interacting, and we're going to talk specifically about youth ministers within the church, but expanding that out just a little bit, because this is something that goes beyond just the youth minister, to really get to the heart of answering your question. And this is something that I talk to other congregations about. First of all, that family unit is vitally important for a kid, because if they see mom and dad or whoever their provider is for their physical needs, okay, and I know we have a lot of dynamics in the church today that are varied, so it's not always that nucleus, mom, dad, kids. There is going to be two situations. You're going to have a situation where mom and dad are genuine in their faith, and they go to church, and it's not just going to church to be this, check the box, we did our church, and then, you don't really think or hear about church until the next Sunday, okay? So you have this this is a strong word, I understand it, but I'm going to use this term just so everybody understands, this hypocritical type of situation where your child sees that what you're doing as far as church is concerned is just something that you do. It's not something that you are. And that's a critical piece of this. All right? Then you have the other group that they have that home where they see mom and dad living their faith. That's demonstrated to them on a daily basis. Man, the power in that is just absolutely phenomenal. And I've come to believe that a lot of families that are actually genuine in their faith, they're true in their faith, but they may not be demonstrating it because they have not had that model to them. They don't really know. And they're just caught in this cycle of they do go to church, but and for them in their heart, they're going to church for all the right reasons, and they love God and they love to worship and they do all of that stuff, but it's not translating for the rest of the week. Okay? There needs to be, as the elders in the church, as the shepherds in the church, the shepherds need to step forward and provide ways and instructions on how to be spiritual families. So that's demonstrated to youth on a daily basis. Let's not kid ourselves. Cody, you have a very limited amount of time with these kids. Okay, the real responsibility on that is with the families. And then I would say second to that is the church at large. We're talking about having other people that are spiritual mentors for these kids. And so one of the things I talk to churches about is having a robust intergenerational connectivity with the kids. That means that the peer group for, let's say, a 12-year-old is not just other 12-year-olds. Their peer group actually expands as part of a relational connectivity with different age categories. Older high school kids, college kids, maybe if you have college kids in your church, all the way up through elderly. That kid needs to have all of those connections in place. Okay? So when you have that taking place and you're firing on all those cylinders, you get a kid that comes here that once they're in college, they have seriously deep roots planted within their church back home. The likelihood of them drifting away, it's not very likely at all. As a matter of fact, they come in and they teach me stuff. So, I don't know. I may have drifted around trying to answer that question.
No.
Did I miss something on that?
No, you're good. I do just want to follow up and see if you think of something else here, though. What advice, if any, would you give a youth minister or anybody that to help guide or direct folks that they are trying to disciple?
Yeah, I think
their own faith.
I think understanding what I just said, the part that they play in that in the kid's life. So as a youth minister, outside of you being there as a mentor for the kid, is to maybe explain some of these concepts that I don't think a lot of church leaders or families are aware of, the impact that it has on their kid. To have that intergenerational connectivity where a kid understands that they have avenues and there's people they can go to in the church that are trustworthy, that they can talk to, and they have that active mentorship going on. And maybe from the youth minister standpoint, having some conversations with the kids who may be looking at mom and dad as hypocritical, but that's not the right way to be looking at that. And you do have that. I don't want to sugarcoat that either. You do have families that are simply going through the motions. They're not connected at all. But you also have, and I hope this is the majority, parents that are going to church, but they just don't understand the importance of displaying what Christ means to them throughout the week for their kids. And so asking the kids as a youth minister, hey, what does that look like for you? How does that make you feel? Let's talk about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, okay, during the week. How are you living out your faith? Are you living out your faith? And the kid the kid may answer, I don't know what you're talking about. And following that as a youth minister, following that up with mom and dad, if you see concerns or red flags there, the kid's being exposed to some things. And then, with the eldership, the leadership of the church stepping in and maybe offering programs to teach parents the importance of having that type of dynamic relationship within the home, so those kids get that root system that they needed. When you mentioned the Acts 2 church, these were families coming together, and they were constantly supporting each other. We know that because they had all things in common, is what Scripture says. And so we need to try to have that type of trust and unity within the church. So, specific examples there for you. Man, this has been a really great discussion. We're probably going to break this up into 2 parts, actually, because I think, like part 1 and part 2 might be effective on that. But final words, Colossians chapter 3, verse 17. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. Folks, tune in next Thursday for another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War. Until then, be good to each other, be kind, love each other, share Christ, and be the light in this world that we so desperately need. And have a blessed week.